I'm Jessica Wilson, and you're listening to Making It Awkward. Welcome back. Today, I bring you my conversation with Dalina Soto, the dietitian behind the Instagram handle Your Latina Nutritionist. Dalina and I got into the salsa of it all and her recent viral Instagram back and forth with a dietitian who was talking shit about tacos and saying that salsa wasn't a vegetable. In 2020, Latina people made up 18.7% of the US population and just 3.1% of dietitians. Additionally, 2.6% were Black, 3.9% were Asian, 0.3% were Indigenous, and 9% either didn't disclose, were mixed race, or didn't report their race, which leaves our field with 81.1% of dietitians being white. Dalina and I discussed that so much of her work is correcting misinformation about cultural foods and helping people to reclaim them. She and I talk about curves and a time she was told she was too sultry. And we get into acculturation, veganism, and wrap the conversation with a brief discussion of PMDD and at what point in her menstrual cycle she gets sassy on social media. She and I just happened to record this episode as the news was breaking that tacos and burritos are sandwiches, according to a judge in Indiana. And because of this, Famous Taco could open a new location at a Fort Wayne shopping center. No word yet on whether this decision will be appealed. Here's my chat with Dalina. Dalina, welcome to the show.
Hi.
I'm so glad that you joined me on what is a remarkable day in Indiana.
Oh.
The taco and burrito are now sandwiches. Mm-hmm.
They have been classified as a sandwich?
Correct, because they are specifically Mexican style sandwiches. Okay.
For what purpose?
For the so that the
for school
developer.
Lunches?
No, so the developer behind the new Quintana Plaza strip mall can put tacos in their strip mall because, they were going to keep fast food in quotation marks out of this strip mall.
Okay, so they were saying that tacos and burritos were fast food.
Fast food. It seems from what I have gathered. And of course I can add a qualifying statement at the end. The agreement allowed for the opening of, quote, made-to-order sandwich restaurants like Subway and Jimmy John's, but barred, quote, traditional fast food restaurants. But now, the proposed Famous Taco restaurant would serve made-to-order tacos, burritos, and other Mexican-style food.
I mean, I'm not mad for them trying to change.
Right. We're doing some taco-based advocacy. Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's very creative.
The subtitle for the Washington Post, it's great. It says, the judge ruled that tacos and burritos are, quote, Mexican-style sandwiches, comma, reigniting the age-old debate. Did you know that there was a debate?
I did not know. But, I mean, I'm sure our besties, the Washington Post, did a phenomenal job at researching.
They did a deep dive into Mexican-style sandwiches. That's what they did. All right. Or maybe Clara would be right by saying they did a shallow dip rather than a deep dive. It's what happened there. All right. Well, thank you for joining me on what is a momentous day in the Midwest.
I am so happy to have been here for this. It definitely taught me something.
Okay. Tell us more about yourself.
So I am a Latina dietitian that did not know that tacos and burritos were classified as sandwiches. So now I need to rethink my title, but everything that I have ever known. But yeah, I am a Latina dietitian. So, I'm just out here on these Instagram streets. Trying to educate on our cultural foods, but I speak from my Latina lens, right? My Dominican lens primarily. And I just want people to just enjoy eating our cultural dishes and not be afraid of them.
And it seems like you've caused some controversy on social
Ugh,
media. The
yes, a
salsa of
lot.
it all.
I honestly, I woke up that morning and I didn't think that this is where my life was going to take me.
Can you describe
You know,
the initial situation?
so there was a dietitian, baby dietitian, I'm going to call her. I think I learned that she's just recently very new at this. And a few people, were tagging me in this video on El Tiki-Toki, like I like to call it. I don't go over there much. So, I was like, what's happening? Like, why am I getting all these mentions? So I
Mhm.
go over and I see this person and they're just saying how like tacos aren't healthy, how like they're not good for you, and talking all this crap about the sandwich. And so so I'm like, hey, I'm responding because people are like, what are you talking about? Like tacos are like great. They have proteins. They have like whole grain, veggies, blah, blah. So people are trying to like educate her in the comments. And she's like doubling down, liking things and like being very rude in the comments. So I just stitched her and I'm just like, listen, when the community is trying to educate you and tell you about the ingredients that are actually used, like, don't be that person. So I ended it, left it, come back a few hours later, and she has doubled down and she is now making a video or has a video for actually making tacos where she explicitly says salsa is not a vegetable. Now I stitched that part. I stitched her words. And in the video, she goes on to say how it is not a vegetable, how people are just throwing a bunch of cheese and a bunch of ingredients in there and it's not healthy. And she proceeds to then make tacos with Brussels sprouts and
Oh,
microgreens.
I love this.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So then I'm like, why are you gentrifying it? Like, there are so many vegetables you could have used that was, not the Brussels sprouts and the microgreens. So, I did a very passionate video on what she did wrong. And I explained to her that 1/4 cup of salsa is a serving of vegetable. And it went viral.
Sure did.
Yeah. She took them down for a little bit, but they're back up.
Mm,
Yeah.
they're back. Okay. I
They're
will
back.
link to them in the show notes. All of them. How did you decide to be out on these Instagram streets in the first place?
Well, I've had a private practice since 2016. I'm in the Philly area, so I had a brick and mortar, establishment business where I, have always taken insurance. I was seeing clients and doing all my dietitian work that way. And then COVID happened. And like everyone else, we had to move virtual. Everything had to go virtually and we were all spending a lot of time on social media. And right before COVID, I want to say in October of 2019, I had changed my name from Nutritiously Yours, which is my practice on Instagram. Cause like a lot of people are like, nobody knows what that is. Like, what are you talking about?
Right.
And I had made it a point like, okay, I am going to try to get more clients this way. Right. So then I changed it to Your Latina Nutrition and it like exploded. Like it exploded before COVID. I went from having like 1,000 followers to like 7,000 followers by December. And I changed my Instagram probably end of October. And then when COVID happened, we were all just chronically online and I was just chronically talking about white rice and our foods. And it just kept getting bigger, bigger and bigger. And I'm just here now.
I love it.
Somehow still doing it and still defending white rice.
The people feel seen. No,
I mean, I would hope. I'm trying.
Well, yeah. I, as a dietitian, I cannot tell you how many conversations I've had about white rice. So the fact that I can, yes, point people, yes. What is it? Like over 50% of the world eats white rice as a staple. But anyhow.
The global South does. I would say probably close to 100% of the global South eats white rice.
As a staple.
The northern part has like the pastas and the like French cuisines, the Italian cuisines. But I
Yes.
mean, if we think about like Asian, African
Yep.
countries,
Hmm.
South America.
Yeah. What do you find unique to being a Latina dietitian?
I guess the uniqueness of it is that there's not that many of us,
Hmm.
um, at least not in the United States, with that like registered dietitian credential.
Sure.
And so I think I just find myself in like a uphill battle all the time, like even arguing with my own profession
Yeah, for sure.
about something that should be, you know, not
Hmm.
that controversial. But yet here we are. I mean, as
Hmm.
you know, our dietetics field is not the most diverse and not the most acceptable to change. I think
Yeah.
those are the words that I'm going to use.
Hmm.
And so, you know, we have a lot of the older dietitians that are very stuck in their ways.
Yes. Yes. The older. For sure.
The older generation. And, you know, it's just, I feel like a constant battle. And I think it's also a constant battle against likes and clicks, right? Like things that are sensationalized are just very quick to go viral, right? That like rage farming.
Hmm.
And it's like, I really don't want to rage farm
Hmm.
people. I really do. That's not why I became a dietitian. And it's just like an uphill battle of constant misinformation that I have to like nip.
Yeah. Since you've paid attention to the Washington Post lately, um, would you describe yourself as an anti-diet dietitian?
That is such an interesting question because it's still in my bio.
Yes.
You know, Kara came out here and she was on here this week. This is the week we're recording, the week that that episode dropped. And she said it's still on there because it does help us, you know, as people are searching, right? It does help us attract the people that are looking for that kind of verbiage and language. I will say that I still call myself an anti-diet dietitian, but I'm not the anti-diet dietitian that you would think of when you think of that word. And I think it's the same thing as like when I was like such an intuitive eating stan back in the day. I was still different, right? I still didn't fit the mold.
Yeah.
And I don't think I still fit the mold of an anti-diet dietitian because we know that that mold is thin white women and I will never fit it. So I will always be different no matter what I call myself.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. What do you think is unique and beautiful? Oh, well, actually, do you use Latina? I heard you say that
I
earlier.
use both. I think that I identify as Latina.
Okay.
But I used to use Latinx and then I learned, right, as we all learn, that that was just a very hard word to pronounce, especially in the Spanish language with that hard X. So along the way, it was changed to Latine, which is a lot easier for us to pronounce. And I use them interchangeably. I think that the people that get it, get it. The people that don't, don't. And the people that are going to be angry about it are going to be angry about it, whether I say Latine or Latinx.
Correct.
So I use them all interchangeably.
Okay.
I identify as Latina. But usually when I am speaking about the community, I try to use Latine.
Okay. Then I will rephrase and ask again. What do you think is unique and beautiful about Latine families and cooking?
I think it's not even just the Latine. I think it's just about culture. I think if we think about all cultures, right? We celebrate, we mourn, like food is such an integral part of who we are as people. And it's so beautiful how we have all of these dishes and traditions and foods that provide so much nutrition. And we didn't have the quote unquote science and research to be like, oh my God, this is so great and, you know, so nutritious. Like indigenous cultures created these dishes that literally provided everything that we needed. And they had their own science, right? They had their own way to cultivate, but they didn't need research. Like they didn't need to know amino acids and like vitamins and things like that. They just knew that they were thriving. And I think, they learned and evolved, and we have all of these amazing dishes that give us everything that we need. And I know we live in a society that likes to know these things, and I like to educate about it. But I think when it comes down to it, it's like our society's thrived on these foods. So why is like all of a sudden not okay? Yeah,
Why?
like antioxidants. I have to use all these buzzwords for what?
For food that tastes good. I don't get
That
it.
tastes amazing, and it's giving you a lot. I get it.
And that's
I think
under
we
the
can have a
store.
little bit of both. I just think that people try to micromanage too much, and I'm like, you don't need to micromanage. You could just add. You can add all these delicious things that are going to add flavor and texture, and you're going to feel good after you eat it.
For sure. I am wondering what you see gets lost in acculturation. So when folks are moving here, but also after they've lived here and are passing things on to their children, things that like are gained and also lost.
This is such a loaded question. So many layers that I want to talk about. I'm going to plug in my book because I have a whole section on acculturation. But I think that the primary thing is that like when we think about the rest of the world, the American dream is like that thing. I don't know if it is anymore, but I would say like when I was born, right? Let's think about the 80s. And my parents coming to the United States and having this idea of the American dream. And I think that when it comes to acculturation, you're coming from another country and you want to fit in, right? You don't want to be identified as different. You just want to be part of, the society, the communities. And depending on where you land, right, that could be easier or it could be harder. I think that for me and my family, they were in the Bronx. So a very big Dominican community. And so my mom and dad were able to be immersed in that Dominican community. So I don't feel like I dealt a lot with that acculturation of like, you have to be, American. Because I always grew up in a very Dominican household surrounded with a lot of Dominican people. And I had those Dominican roots. I do, however, know and feel that like when I went to school, that's when things were different, right? And for a lot of first generation kids or immigrant kids, we go into the schools and then people are looking at us funny, right? Like avocados, if I was to bring an avocado in the 90s to school, I would be like laughed out of the, lunchroom. And now everybody wants to sell a $20 avocado toast.
Correct.
So there's this idea of like, in order for me to fit in, I have to do these American things. And when I'm doing these American things, I will not speak my Spanish language, or my parents ask me not to speak the Spanish language and just kind of like immerse myself in the English education. And a lot of the times things are lost in that sense from a cultural perspective. But then I think about food and I think of how like fast food is everywhere here, right? And it's like, well, if I'm going to be American, I'm going to hit up, McDonald's or like, and a lot of the times we know because of redlining and a lot of the issues also that are in these communities, those are the foods that are available, right? And I often think about how if there aren't supermarkets for me to get the ingredients that I need, and I've never had a frozen mango in my life, I'm not gonna go have a frozen mango that's not gonna taste the same, right? Like I get it. It's such a double-edged sword because I promote the frozen and I say add it and do all of this. But for someone that's coming directly from the island, right? Like we have mango trees in my house in the Dominican Republic. I could literally climb a tree and get a fresh ass mango. It is not the same when you step foot in the United States and then you're not in mango season. There's no supermarkets and then you have to go and buy a frozen mango if you want it. It's not the same. And I think that begins this process of losing a lot of those cultural foods and kind of like leaning into more of the American style foods that are available in those areas because it doesn't taste the same anymore. And I think that in the reclaiming of our culture, we can have a little bit of both. And I think that, more people know that they can travel to get, they can go to a fancy Trader Joe's or, my favorite Aldi and get some fresh fruits and vegetables there. But I think that I always say like, it's best to do what we can with what we have. Just because something's different
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that it's worse, right? Just because you lean into the frozen mango doesn't mean that it's worse. Like you can make something out of it. I don't know. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like I just went around in like 30 circles. I hope
Oh,
I
I
made
think
sense.
people are going to love that. That was great. I really appreciate it. Clearly, you're writing a book because there was so much to say. Yes. Hold on to that. After you're done, you won't remember anything you put in it. So hold on to those moments where you have something to say. Speaking of reclaiming and
Yes.
acculturation, let's talk curves.
It's another double-edged sword because we're so sexualized as Latinas for being spicy and curvy and like loud. And you think of Sofia Vergara and like Salma Hayek, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the portrayal and sexualization that we
Mm-hmm.
get in the media
Mm-hmm.
and how that's like a double-edged sword. But then also like we do have the curves and we don't fit that thin white woman mold. And it's like, how do we reclaim that without being over sexualized in a sense? Like, how do I not be called the spicy Latina? Or, in the words of a brand that I worked with that told me I had to re record because my voice was too sultry. Do you think my
Oh,
voice is sultry, Jessica?
wow. Sultry? I have not
Sultry.
heard that one as coded language yet.
Uh
Wow.
huh.
All
I was
right.
accused of being sultry. This is how I speak.
So were they looking for like a voice maybe that's more nasally like this and that goes up at the end of
I don't know. I had to put on my Valley girl voice
yeah,
for that. And like,
go up at the end of
no.
every
Yeah.
sentence? Yeah,
Yeah, I had to code switch a little bit.
for sure. Wow.
But yeah, it's those things where we try to reclaim, but then it's kind of like they try to reel us back in
Mm-hmm.
and be like, well, not like that.
Totally.
Not like that.
Yeah. I live in California and there's like vast differences very close together between farm worker communities and like super duper rich like community like cities that are right next
Mm-hmm.
to people. So like school districts can blend. In my book I tell the story of a client that I had who was thought to have an eating disorder, was referred to me, and then as we started peeling back the layers, you know, she was eating quinoa and all of these things, and I was like, I don't like, tell me about your love for quinoa, like this is not making sense. And you know, it turned out that she was not eating her cultural foods and losing weight because she was finally getting the attention of men in college
Mm-hmm.
that she was not getting in high school. And so we were having this conversation and I'm like trying to peel back these layers. And I was like, are you getting the attention of white men that you weren't
Yeah.
getting? Right? Like, are you getting now the attention that you wanted because you're not having, because you don't have curves anymore? And
Yeah.
she was very mad at the end because it was, yes, she yelled at me for that one. And I was like, so what I think is going on here is more, you know, your
Yeah.
cultural belonging, your identity, and maybe you don't have an eating disorder. So how do we,
Yeah.
you know, negotiate these
Yeah.
things? Yes.
Yeah.
So we got her away from
A
her
lot.
white eating disorder therapist and over to a person of color. Turns out she didn't need me anymore. She's working on her
Turned out she was
identity.
fine.
Yes, and reclaiming
She just wanted to
herself.
eat food again.
Yeah, and that was that. She just
That
checked
was
in a
it.
couple times, and I was like, "This is
I love
amazing.
it.
I'm happy for you." But
I love
that's
it.
definitely what I think about. Yeah, when it comes to acculturation and curves, and just how
Yeah.
whiteness will
It's
always win.
it's a lot because a lot of the curve also has to be in a certain way, right? I think,
Yes, good call.
it has to be in the butts and in the hips, but you have to have a super small waist and a really flat stomach. I mean, we see that in Black culture as well, right? It's you gotta be skinny thick, right? You can't be like curvy thick.
No,
It's a lot.
it is so much, and it's so sad as a clinician. Like on me, I'm not feeling like sad for people, but like just hearing those stories as a clinician, as I'm sure you do, just over and over
Mm-hmm.
again, and you're like, it shouldn't be like this, but
It shouldn't.
it shouldn't, but it is. Is there a story or two that you would like to tell about your clients or your family or anything?
Oh, I think it's important for me to name that obviously I fit a lot of that, mold in the sense that I do live in a straight size body, right? Um, I'm curvy, but not the kind of curvy that obviously we just talked about where, I don't have I'm not Sophia.
You're not Sophia.
I'm not Sophia. I'm not Salma, but I still fit a lot of the molds, and I think that it's important for me to name that a lot of people gravitate to listening to what I have to say, probably because I do look the way that I do, as you know, like even in like liberation work, and how it's been, co-opted. It's because when people that are in a smaller body speak about it, they often get listened to. And I think that that's not something that's lost on me, that I know that like more people are inclined to listen to me because I do live in a body that is mostly acceptable. I mean, I do get the trolls here and there that tell me like, oh, why would I listen to somebody with your body fat percentage? I'm like, bro, how do you know my body fat percentage?
What the?
Like, how do you know? But, the occasional comments like that, but I definitely don't deal with the comments that a lot of people deal with trying to speak out about these topics. So I think that it's important to name that, and that I name it any chance that I can. And I do think that it's important for me to, and what I try to do is to advocate and like have people learn from who I think is doing the work and does look different than me, and learning from, the Black liberationists that started all of this movement before it was co-opted, and the ones that are still doing the work now, right? I think that's important to name because I do benefit from.
Yeah, you mentioned your voice and you're writing a book. How's it going?
How's it going? Well, I told you before we started recording that I wish that I would have gotten a ghostwriter, and I didn't. So here we are in the trenches.
So how long have you been writing the book?
A full year now. Actually, May. Yeah, I think it was like Mother's Day weekend last year. I got the contract.
Nice.
So yeah, it's been a whole year. We are on edit number 2.
Nice.
Probably going to have another round of edits. And then the goal, the hope, fingers crossed, is that it will go into publication mid to late June. And then it should be released March of 2025.
There we are.
Yeah, March 2025. Hopefully. I don't know how pre-sale works. I don't know how any of that works. Well. When do I get the pre-sale?
A month or 2 before.
Okay.
Yeah, because your galley copies will go out too. So your not final copies will go out and people will kind of review and amp you up. And so we'll be looking for it. What's the book about?
It is about this whole Latina anti-diet idea and how we're going to reclaim our cultural foods. And, I talk about my chula method, right? That I have put together, where I try to take all of that, right? The identities that we hold, acculturation, Marianismo, all of these things that I feel like affect us, particularly as Latina women or Latina women, or, however you identify. It's really just me trying to put together everything that I've learned as a dietitian, and then kind of like elevate our foods and kind of like give the community a space to learn where it came from, and then have steps to like reclaim and how we can move forward. I don't know. I try to wrap all the chapters in my head as you were asking me. I'm like, oh my God.
What is the book about?
What is it about? I don't know.
I don't know.
I forgot.
Food, bodies. Yes. It's what? No, it's very relatable. It's so much. Yes. I have heard from many people and either watch documentaries or whatever who advocate for Latina people to become vegan and inherently call either Mexican food or whatever very, greasy and too high in meat and all of those things.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
My bias is that it's vegan, and I'm like, nah about that.
Yeah.
And I think that everybody can benefit from eating more plant-based foods. I think that we cannot, deny that. I think that, eating more plant-based foods is going to give us more fiber, more, variety in our day. But I think that the idea that going vegan is going to magically, one, save the world, and two, make you healthier gives me the ick, right? I think it places so much emphasis on the individual when we should be really looking at the corporations and, the 1% that is causing most of the issues with our environment. For me, it's more of like, I hear a lot of people be like, but our culture eats a lot of vegan. And I'm like, but our cultures were never vegan. You can't be vegan. You couldn't be vegan and be alive back then. Where are we going to get your B12 from? We didn't have shots.
Or supplements.
Right? So like, from an indigenous perspective, right? Indigenous people believe that you replenish the land and you replenish whatever you're taking, right? So like you use the animal from the nose to the tail, you use all of it. They might not have ate a lot of meat because they had a cycle of how they butchered or utilized the land, but they were never vegan. And we have a lot of quote unquote vegan dishes because of the way that the cycles that the environment went through. But nobody was fully vegan.
Yeah.
They couldn't be vegan.
I feel like I've been to conferences and heard from people who then shame their family's food and like come in, trying to make everyone vegan because, and I'm like, I understand what you're saying, but also at the same time, it is like our food is bad. This is the new way to do it.
It gives me the ick. So I don't dabble in there. I don't dabble in that. It'll probably anger some people. And when we think of our dishes, many of them are plant-based. And I think that also when we think of like why we eat meat, it was also a sign of status, like when we think about the different cuts that we have in our dishes, like traditionally Latino dishes have some of the like tougher cuts that you have to stew or cook for very long times because you didn't have access to, the filet mignon or, the ribeye, right? Like you weren't buying that. You were buying the tails. You were buying the tongue. You were buying the chitlins, right? So a lot of our dishes culturally also have to do with like what we could afford. And I don't think there's anything wrong with continuing to eat them. I think I hear a lot of people talk about lard.
Yeah, right. Oh
lard
my God.
is the reason why people say that it's unhealthy. I think we also forget that like we weren't in, Europe with olives and olive oil, and we needed a way to add fat to our food. And I think from a sustainability perspective, right, we use the whole animal, right? And so lard is part of the animal. You want to fry something? Let's fry it, because guess what? We fry a lot of our dishes because that's how we got rid of bacteria. That's how you can cook a lot of food quick. There's reasons why our communities fry, and there's ways that we can continue to eat those foods and maybe not deep fry them in lard. But to say that our foods are fried and lard is the problem really takes away from how, I want to say genius, but innovative our communities were. It was such a cool idea. Like, who would have thought? Like, let me just take this lard. And they needed it. I'm sorry. They needed that kind of food because they were out there on the fields. They were expending a lot of energy. They needed that lard.
You and I are not close friends or close colleagues, but there have been multiple times in our limited communication that you have mentioned at what point in your menstrual cycle you are. And Um, I would love to hear a bit more about that, especially, as we're talking about the stress of the book and things like that.
Yes. So I have PMDD. So I have like super rough PMS. It's like a few levels higher than regular PMS. And so when I'm in my luteal phase, which is like the week before my period,
Okay.
it's not a good week for me. And I feel like that is the week where I'm like just over people, right? And I'm just like, over everything. And those are the roughest weeks for me to write because I'm just like crying and emotional and I hate everything. And, it's just like this super like heightened cycle. But then, that's over. You get your period and then you're in your follicular phase. And that's like ovulation. And that's when like you feel really good. And I feel like that's when I'm ready to fight. So like when you see me being sassy on social media, I'm probably on that phase because I don't care. And I'm just ready to fight. So those are the only two phases that I know. It's when I'm like feeling really, really good or when I'm feeling really, really bad. And I know because I don't have a choice. My body tells me.
Okay. Oh, bodies are really annoying. I don't like
I don't like it either. But that's the only reason why I know. Because if I'm ready to be sassy and fight, I'm like, I know.
Interesting.
And when I want to crawl into a hole, I know.
Wow. Book writing is a roller coaster, but to experience that every 28 to 35 days while writing a book seems tragic.
27 for me. So yes.
Okay. That's too frequently.
It's too frequently.
Is there anything that you would like to say about yourself, your work, your family, your community, your clinicians, your besties?
Yeah. Well, one, I'm petty. So now I have Salsa is a veggie merch.
Oh. So. Okay. I'll link to it.
So it'll be available soon. I'm waiting for my samples and then I'll put it up. But yes, go on and buy your Salsa is a veggie mug, cups, stickers, shirts, sweatshirts. And if you're on the market for a dietitian, we take insurance in 14 states. So come on over and work with us.
I love that. Where can people find you?
You can find me on all social media as Your Latina Nutritionist.
Website?
YourLatinaNutrition.com.
Where will people be able to find the merch?
On the website and on my socials. I'll probably link it once I get it.
All right.
But if you want to be petty with me.
That is like my default. I'm so excited. We'll for sure be buying merch. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much to Dalina for coming on the show. All of her info will be linked in the show notes. Next week will be a personal episode for me and the first of 2 dedicated to Pride Month. You will get to meet my spouse, Elisha. She's been mentioned in a couple episodes, including the one about Lexi, and next week you'll get to hear from her directly. She'll answer questions about autism, pronouns as a non-binary person, 4-H, FFA, and camping, as Whitney is perplexed by the concept of outdoors. We'll talk about neurodiversity in our relationship and what it's like being 2 Capricorns married to each other. Until next time, make it awkward, friends. This has been Making It Awkward. The best way to support the show is by rating, reviewing, and sharing it with a friend. You can become a sustaining Patreon member of the show, linked in the show notes, which will support the editing and episode mixing of Jen Jacobs, who I finally got to meet in person last week. She's as delightful as you would imagine. This is a production of The Body Politic and is supported by Patreon members like you, as well as the legacy of Sacramento Outboard Services.